Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thrive, Not Just Survive. Happy Friday to you all. I'm your host, Nasira Jamal, and I am so grateful that you have all decided to join me on this journey as I bring towards you different information, different speakers, different entrepreneurs that can share their light. And Fridays are dedicated to having some really in-depth, soul-moving, more mindful thinking kind of conversation with Dr. Bryantbruce. And as we continue this conversation on Black Lives Matter and the racial injustices that are out there and the inequities in terms of what the African American people suffer day in and day out, it is important for us to continue this conversation no matter what is going on around us. There's lots of things that do come up in terms of media and different things that we are addressing, but I want to not lose sight of this conversation. And I'm so privileged to have Dr. Bryantbruce join us every Friday so that we can continue this and make sure that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're part of the conversation and also part of the solution if you choose to be. So let's get this conversation started as I bring Dr. Cheryl on. Hey, Cheryl, welcome to the show. I appreciate you so much. Happy Friday.
Hey, Nasira, happy Friday. Glad to see that you made it through safely another week.
Yes, yes. And that's also a big blessing as we hear different things about, with COVID and all the stuff that's going on, it's tough. It's tough to be hearing all of the tragedies, the losses, the things that are out there. But I don't want to lose sight of the conversations that we're having, especially on these Fridays, about the things that I feel sometimes get downplayed or, on media, it kind of gets pushed back because other things come up. So I want to continue. I want to continue this conversation to keep it up and about so people are still thinking about it and doing things about it from their own perspective. So can you share with us a little bit? We talked about how media, is out there, but our responsibility to get more information in terms of the impartial stuff that we need to kind of investigate on our own.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, everybody has their favorite television station or their favorite media channel that they're getting their news from, and basically that they're getting their world views from. The media is supposed to be impartial. It's supposed to do impartial reporting. And when you're watching shows can have different slants and political views and so on and so forth, but news itself is supposed to be reported impartially. I don't know when that fell by the wayside, but it has. And we all know that depending on which station you're watching, they all have different social and political slants. It really becomes our responsibility to educate ourselves, because what will happen is that the attention of the media will be drawn to the next most interesting thing. And one of the things that I'm seeing happen right now is that everybody's super saturated on the Black Lives Matter situation. And things are starting to change. The Black community is starting to pull away from the Black Lives Matter organization, not from the basics of the basic tenets that Black Lives Matter initially was reflecting, and that the African American community um, took on and embraced. But there are some underlying political agendas that Black Lives, the organization, has, that the African American community does not necessarily embrace. So they're pulling away, and even some of the white followers of the organization are pulling away from some of this other stuff that the organization has going on politically. So we've all been, as I said, super saturated with all of this, and there's an amount of fatigue. So one of the most likely things to happen is that when the next new and interesting thing comes along, which at this time, COVID-19 has been there, but it kind of waned because the numbers were going down and people were talking about getting out again. Then all of a sudden the numbers are going back up and the media is saying, look over here, Florida and Texas. And so everyone's going, oh, wow. And the Black Lives Matter thing has now taken a back seat. It's important that we continue the conversations. But in order to continue the conversations, since this is no longer a dramatic media interest like it was before, now it's part and parcel on us to take responsibility for our own education. And that education means looking for different sources of information and looking for different valid sources of information. Because depending on which station that you're watching, African Americans may be being villainized or they may be being celebrated. Uh, Caucasians may be being villainized or they may be being celebrated. And we all know that no one group are either, the villains or the heroes. We have to look at people as people. So it's inherent upon us to look at different stations. I look at several. I mean, I don't have television anymore because I just really was not happy with the direction that mainstream media had gone and that television really had gone. And so we do Netflix and Amazon Prime and things like that that allow us to select what media we watch and select what shows we watch. And I watch several of the US channels so that I know what's being said on different sides of the fence in the news. And I like to also watch the BBC and some of the other world news channels to see what's being said around the world because you all are getting different pieces than we are, and you're getting different perspectives than we are. Plus, you all are getting international news. Canadian news has a different take on things, and when you're inside of any country, every country has its own propaganda machine going. So even the news you get within inside your country about your country may not necessarily be the truth, but what your country wants its people to believe. So I think it's really important to look at news from different parts of the world and see what they're saying about your country as well, because a lot of times their diplomats are getting information about the country um, and getting pieces of information that are valid pieces of information that may not be being shared within the country.
Right.
So it's important to look at different sources and again to keep the conversations going. Try and listen in on different conversations. And you may be in a community that is not a diverse community. That doesn't mean the conversations are any less important because this is a big wide world and we are mobile these days. So you may not have any African Americans in your community. You may not have Chinese in your community. You may not have Latinos in your community. Whatever it is, you may not have them in your community. Or if you're Black, you may not have whites in your community. But guaranteed sooner or later, you are going to run into them and you are going to need to deal with them as neighbors, friends, coworkers, whatever the case may be. And you want to do it in a spirit of collegiality, compassion, and humanity.
Yeah. I think, I mean, empathy is such a big thing that's required right now across the
Yes.
globe, many
Yes.
different levels, on all levels. I just
Mm-hmm.
also think from the human perspective, just, we have to really up our skills on critical thinking, as
Yes.
opposed to being the followers of just saying, okay, well, that's what they're saying must be true kind of
Yes.
thing. We need to use our own brain power and say critically, how do we really assess the information we're hearing, if we hear it from different places and kind of look at it from that perspective of validity, is this information valid? And
Yes.
where is it coming from, right? If it's
Yes.
one-sided, or if there's a perspective in there that doesn't align with you, then look into it further, right? And I
Yes.
think that's something that's a skill that may have been gone by the wayside a little bit, about our
Yes.
critical thinking strategies, or even the ability to encourage people to say, think about this a little bit deeper than just what you're hearing.
Yes. Yes. And the thing is, you have to remember that everybody has an agenda. The media has a certain agenda. Politics definitely has a certain agenda. And you need to not follow because it's a party or because it's popular amongst your friends or whatever the reason is that you're following a particular leader or that you're watching a particular station or that you're behaving in particular manners. You are accountable for yourself. Nobody else is accountable for you. And it doesn't matter what the masses are doing. With the masses, there's something called a herd mentality.
Mhm.
And with herd mentality, individuals may do things that they would never condone doing and would never accept for themselves as individuals. But they get into this herd, and the herd is their tribe for the moment. And well, these are the tribal rules. And so this is what I'm going to do. We can't do that. I mean, we have to have a certain amount of that to exist as a society. But when you join any particular tribe, whether it's a news station or whether it's the friends you hang out with, or whether it's a movement like Black Lives Matter, it is inherent upon you to look closely and see what do they really represent.
Right.
Is it in alignment with your beliefs? And if it is not in alignment with your beliefs, is it close enough in alignment with your beliefs that you can work with it and move away from some of it, or in some cases even educate others as to what your beliefs are if you think that there's a better way. But it is your responsibility to know what those underlying core values are. And if you're just kind of rolling around as sheep following the leader and you have no idea what it is that the group that you're working with is representing, then you are likely to get swept up into something that may not be who you really are or what you want to represent. So you have to take responsibility for yourself.
I think there's something there that you said that's really important is, you have to understand the core values of whatever the news channel, the political parties, or whatever movements there are. But I think there might be something here that might be missing, is sometimes people don't even know what their own core beliefs and values are. And so the first step is to connect with that. Like, what is it that you believe in? What is it that you really stand for? And have your own level of values and being attached to them, right? So much so that when you're not in alignment, this doesn't sit right. But when we are not clear on our own values and belief systems, then we're kind of more into just following whichever group, wherever the flow is hardest and fastest, because we kind of get swept away with it. So I think that the big thing here would be to have that reflection, that kind of inner audit of your own value system, your own beliefs, and see where they are, what they mean, and how are you going to move forward with them, and which groups to align with what you believe in. So I think that's
Yes,
really important before you go off and say those values are not my values, but then what
yes.
are your values, right?
And that's very important because most people today have no idea what their true values are because there's so much noise and busyness in our world that they don't take the time to stop, spend time with themselves, and know who they really are. They define themselves by the outer world and by the outer tribe that they are coexisting in. The other part of it is because they do define themselves this way, this is where they look to for their acceptance. And they don't develop enough of a sense of self to have appreciation for themselves and to accept themselves. And what happens when that is the case is they don't have the courage to stand on their own values if their values are not in alignment with the group. They fear being ridiculed, they fear being wronged, they fear not being accepted or, being just flat out rejected. And they don't have the strength to say, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it. And even if they believe something, they usually have not thought it through well enough to understand why they believe it, to even be able to present it rationally and say, hey, this is what I believe, this is why I believe it, and to even have a conversation with someone else to defend their position.
Yeah, and it all that whole idea of having that self-confidence and the ability to talk very confidently, and I don't mean in terms of butting heads or fighting or violence. I just mean being able articulate that that's what I believe in, and you don't have to agree with me. We can agree to disagree, but these are my core beliefs, and I'm going to stand by them with or without you, meaning I can stand on my own. I don't need the entire tribe to agree, and be able to articulate well enough, because then like you said, sometimes it's like you don't even know why you believe what you believe. You kind of just been
Right.
surely going with that, right? So I think this
Right.
whole conversation, even today, is really about that inner work or that inner conversation that we must first have before we can go out in the world and say, you know what, this is what I'm really going to fight for. This is what I truly believe equity is, or, how this racial injustice that we're dealing with, I'm not okay with it because these are my core beliefs, and I want to be able to be part of a movement that's going to move this forward.
Yes. And one of the things that I recommend people do is people are dancing around on the internet and looking at all of these videos. There's a woman named Jane Elliott that's on. I encourage people, whether you agree with her or not, to go on and listen to what Jane Elliott is saying. And the reason that I say that, I mean, it's educational in and of itself, and it's very interesting, the experimentation that she's doing. But she is constantly throwing out the titles of books and saying, this is a must read. Everybody's got to read this book. I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that people need to read, not just pick up everything off of the internet, because I mean, now books also have a slant. Writers have a slant as to where they're going, but books are more often referenced, and they are defined better. It's easier to look at a book, and if there's propaganda or stupidity in there, it's easier to see it because you have the time to digest and analyze. When you're watching media, you are in response mode because they know that the best way to get their point across is to trigger you emotionally. So they aren't necessarily trying to educate as much as entertain and trigger. Whereas with the book, there is data being presented that you can analyze, that you can take time to cross reference with other books that may not be in agreement with the book that you're reading. You have the time to cross reference and check back for historical representation of what you're looking at. I encourage people to read widely and to read a diverse amount of a diverse type of material, because then you will get different perspectives on all sorts of different things that may not even be related as you see it at the time, but then as you're thinking it through, you can use it. And we talked beforehand about the picture that I posted of the cat and dog, and I was saying how much our pets can teach us. And even though what was happening with my cat and my dog had nothing to do with what's going on in the world now. There's still the instruction that one can take on how these two very different animals, sworn enemies, quickly, very quickly, I mean, within less than a day, came to an agreement. Okay, we're going to have to live in the same household together, so we are going to have to come to some kind of understanding. And in less than 2 days, they have bonded to the point of being friends. And by day 3, we are now family, and we're protecting each other, and we're working cooperatively. And day 4, they are sharing and self-sacrificing with each other. And now they're the best of friends. Their relationship is more sister and brother or mother and son, but there's definitely a strong relationship. And then when we introduced another dog into the picture, instead of it all flying apart, these two established the rules for the other dog, and the other dog said, okay, well, then we are a tribe, and these 3 animals are now going for a walk in the woods together and looking out for each other. And this is all in a very short time period in
And
animals that don't speak the same language.
right. And where I think we talked about this earlier, that really we have so much to learn, right? And
Mhm,
we are sort of the higher species in terms of our brain power, but we can
mhm,
look at these animals, right? Like you said, sworn enemies and now best friends, family,
mhm.
protectors, self-sacrificing.
Yeah,
If they can do it, then there's no reason why the humankind
right.
cannot find a way to make this work.
We
And
are in our own way. We are in our
yes,
own way.
yeah,
We create all of this rhetoric that isn't real, and we stick it up as roadblocks.
yeah.
We need to just knock all of the dumb stuff down. You get a bunch of young children in the playground before they have been taught about race or religion or sex or, any of the dividers, and the children just play. And you have these wonderful, mirthful laughs and children hugging each other and children caring about each other. This is where we begin, and then adults start to throw in junk that the children internalize, and then the separation and the tribalism begins.
Well, division is
Children,
the division is actually being like it's taught that
yes, yes,
different, you're in this, you're this, you're in this class or whatever it is.
uh-huh.
Like you said, children don't come this way. In fact,
No,
when they're playing in a playground and they're all doing, the same kinds of things, right?
yeah,
They're basing their relationship with each other not on division, but in terms of how they can relate to each other and make things work on the playground and have fun. At the end of the day, it's like
yeah,
collaboration of
yes,
having fun. So I really think that there's a lot to learn with our animals that can teach us in terms of cooperation. And then even looking at young children when they're put into even a playpen, if you put 3 babies in there from 3 different countries, different color, creed, whatever, religion, you
uh-huh.
see them behaving differently, right? They're going
Yeah,
to basically just come up to each other and take the soother out of the other one's mouth and put it in their mouth. Like
yes,
they
yes,
don't have these kinds of divisions. So I really think there's a lot to learn from the experience that we have already, where we
yes.
say, you know what, there's something to be said about that relationship with the kids or whatever. Yeah.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
this is again part of us being aware and awakening to that level of contrast studying.
Yes,
Where
yes.
you're saying, look for the information, validate the information, check different channels out, talk to different groups of people.
And
And
be critical of the information you have brought in. And it doesn't matter whether this information is being brought in by friends or the news or whoever. Understand that people have bias, and even within your own families there may be bias. So if you're presented with some information, look at it critically and see if you feel, according to your core values, that it's valid. And if you don't know what your core values are, then it's time for some serious, self-reflection, figure out who you are and how you want to fit in this world, what you want to stand for, and what you ultimately want to be remembered by. What do you think is important? And, we talk about purpose, and to a certain extent, none of us really know what our full purpose is, but take some time to explore where you fit in the world and what you think your contribution is,
Yeah.
and weigh that against what you're getting back from other people and see if there's a congruence.
Yeah. I think really important here is, as you're discovering all of this, is to really master the art of listening. So if somebody is saying something, even if it's not in alignment with you, rather than going into a reactionary mode or defensive mode, the art of listening allows you to see or hear the other person and be empathetic towards the thing, the idea that they have their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We can all build empathy by allowing others to have their say, and then giving ourselves the opportunity to have our say as well. And
Mm-hmm.
all about working together, coming to an understanding, because there will be things that you may not agree. We can agree to disagree.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
I mean, we're not all saying that every single human on this earth, 7 point whatever billion people, should think one way.
And I think that it's also important to understand that there is there isn't any shame in being wrong.
Yes.
If you find, as you're exploring your world, that an opinion that you are holding is wrong, that something that you are doing is wrong, as you're doing your self investigation, it is no longer in an alignment with who you want to be, or the factual data shows you that the position that you held cannot be a correct one, or in some way needs to be adjusted. There's no shame in that. The shame comes in holding that position, even though you know at your core that it is not the right thing to do, the right thing to say, the right thing to think. And, if you are a part of a group that is maintaining a position that you know is wrong, it is your responsibility to yourself to step back from
Yeah.
it, to step into something that's more in alignment with who you want to be and with the world you want to live in.
And I think that really speaks to like the fear of not being accepted in a group, or the rejection we talked about earlier. For sometimes people will continue with something just so they could have this kind of connection with others, just to be a part of something and someone, as opposed to being isolated and feeling like, oh boy, like I'm on my own, right? So the
Yes,
idea again is to come to yourself and find out who you are and what you really believe in, and be okay with it that maybe others may not be in that same place as you.
yes.
And
And
the
you're
whole,
never
yeah.
and you're never alone if you're friends with yourself.
Well, that's it. But I just mean, like, if people are looking for validation from others, being part of a group where you may not be congruent there, that it's okay that you're with your own beliefs, and that in itself is very, very huge. And I think people need to get out of this of, oh my gosh, what will they think? What will my family think?
Yes,
What will my parents
yes,
think? They got to get out of this mode of, what are others going to think of me? But it's
yes.
really important to say, what am I thinking of me?
Yes, yes.
More
And
so,
nobody else can give you happiness.
right?
Nobody else can give you inner peace. You have to do that for yourself. And if it's in alignment with the group that you were with, wonderful. If it's out of alignment with the group that you're with, that's fine. Your responsibility is to find your own happy place and be responsible for it.
Yeah. And I think that way of just kind of tying this conversation together is, it's so important in all of these things that we talk about, is the relationship with self. Because
Mm-hmm.
we know who we are. We show up for our communities, our families, our people, our tribes in a
Yes.
way more authentic, more loving, more compassionate way if we have this very strong relationship with ourselves. Because if
Yes.
we're broken inside, we're showing up broken, and we're just making this sort of monumental in the energies that we're leaving behind for others, right? Is we're
Yes.
not really contributing something positive, because we're already coming with something that is already broken. So I
Yes.
just want to say, for, thank you again. Like, this was a really good conversation. I think from, where we started, we definitely want to continue about the stuff that we want mankind to be different about, in
Yes.
those bigger things. But really today, I think we address something that's really important, is to align with your own values first and be able to stand for them in groups of people. If there's needing to be a conversation that has to
Mm-hmm.
be confident in that, be really true to what you believe in, and not just follow the crowd. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you, Cheryl. This was a really good conversation. I'm so grateful that we can have this, like, on Fridays, where I think our conversations come from, we have a topic, but then we really dive into other things that can help people really reflect and think about
Yes.
things differently.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, we do not live in an insulated situation. And so everything that we are experiencing in some way reflects on every other aspect of our lives. And so we have to look at those things and see what all the connectors are, and draw them in to create a place that is warm and authentic and supportive, for ourselves and for everybody else.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Words of wisdom, and I love it. So happy Friday to you. I will see you next week. I wish you a wonderful week, a healthy, happy, prosperous. And I hope the animals can continue to share their wisdom with us, because I love seeing that. When you posted it, it really warmed my heart. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So you enjoy the week. It's the weekend. So
Yes.
enjoy.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I'll see you soon.
All right.
I hope you guys enjoyed that session. I believe that, as conversations happen, people that are meant to hear them, hear them. And I ask for you guys to share. You never know who's out there looking for something, some wisdom, some way of connecting to themselves. So please share and ask questions, get involved, ask us questions. Cheryl's around, I'm around. Find out what you really stand for, what you believe in. And if you want to have conversations deep like this, start having them. And let's not live in fear. So I want to wish you a very happy and a beautiful, blessed Friday. Enjoy your weekend with your family and whatever else you're doing out there. Make sure you're safe. Remember to be kind to yourself and others. I'll see you on Monday right here at 10 a.m.